Well, it's not working in prod. Indeed, it's not working in prod. Well, it's not my problem. It works just fine on my machine and on the dev server. Well,
I told you all systems are ISOs. And if it's working in dev, it's working in prod.
it's ISO?
Oh, yeah. Essentially, I mean, pretty much almost. Almost?
What do you mean, almost?
You know, there's maybe a very small gap in minor versions. And for some plugins. Nothing particularly important.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Peter McKee. I'm on the developer advocacy team here at Docker. And today we have a really cool guest I'm excited to have, Lukonde. So Lukonde is a senior software engineer at Intellect. He currently consults in the financial services sector, specializing in cloud and DevOps engineering, cloud architecture designs, cloud security at an enterprise level in the AWS landscape. He's a 4-time AWS certified and is an advocate for containerization and serverless technologies. Thank you so much, Lukonde, for joining us. Really glad you're here. How are you?
Good. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Coming to us live all the way from where? Tell everybody where you're from. Where you're
Johannesburg, South Africa. Yeah, but I'm originally from Zambia.
Ah, cool. Yeah, like this is so. I love the internet. I love the internet. We're able to talk. I'm here in Austin, Texas. You're halfway around the world, different time zones and everything. Yeah, it's really cool to connect with you. I watched your DockerCon talk. Really enjoyed it. One of the if not the highest most watched, most loved show or talk, I should say. A little hard because virtual conferences are interesting.
Yeah.
But was that your first DockerCon?
Yes, that actually was my first DockerCon, and definitely honored to have spoken at it. What's funny is, I knew about it beforehand, and I had watched a couple of the talks previously, and it was a personal goal of mine to actually eventually talk at a DockerCon. So I remember pushing through the submissions for the call for papers, and I was thinking to myself, like, I don't know if this is even going to work out, but just worth the shot. So when it happened, I was super stoked.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's super interesting because I know I've been on your side, right? And you're like, oh, I'm never getting accepted. This talk's going to be horrible, right? And actually, on our side, when we reviewed it, we're like, oh, this is going to be cool. This looks like a great talk, right? It was one of at the top of our list. We're like, yep, that's got to go on. That's great. Cool. Yeah, it's funny being on the other side and not knowing what's going on, In the voices comes like, oh man, I should never
twiddling your thumbs, you're a little nervous. So
yeah, cool. Well, it was a great talk. Get ready. We're going to be in the new year here. I know here internally we're already starting to talk about Docker in 2021, DockerCon 2021. So cool. All right. So today you're going to be talking about. Well, tell us what are you going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so it will be very similar to my DockerCon talk, actually. Building multi-container applications with Docker Compose locally. And then I'm also just going to give a quick walkthrough of how to actually secure your container images using Snyk and how to, the kind of commands that you'd run in the CI stage of your pipeline before you push them over to your Docker repository.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I got to ask. So are you a gamer? So you got some gaming gear in the background there.
This is funny. I knew this was going to come up. I'm not a gamer.
No.
So I'm actually at my friend's place. Yeah, I got it. I used to be into gaming. I used to love it. I think the only games that would pull me back right now would be if they made a new Uncharted game. And I think it's the new Spider-Man games that recently came out. Those, that would pull me back in. Aside from that, nah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm not a big gamer either. When I first got into computers, personal computers were coming out, and we had these adventure games, and they were all text. I know I'm dating myself a little bit, but it was weird. We liked playing them. We'd all sit around like in the living room with like the little computer monitor up, right? And we'd all decide, do we need to go east? Do we need to unlock the door? But I was more interested in programming. Like, how did they work, right? How do you do this, right? That's what's super interesting.
Absolutely. I still marvel at the guys that actually behind the guys and ladies behind the game engines, the people that actually build the game engines. That I just find that fantastic.
Yeah. I even picked up a book. This is years ago. I was like, I should learn how to do graphics and that kind of programming. Yeah, matrix math and all that. Yeah, it wasn't,
Right.
wasn't my
Yeah.
cup of tea. Yeah, but it's super cool, that pipeline, the whole game loop and everything. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, why don't we? Are you ready to go? You want to just jump right into it? I'm excited to see what you have to show us and hear your talk for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to jump into that if
Okay.
let's get to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw it on your screen here. Got a little inception going. We always do this.
All right. Okay, cool. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, fantastic. Cool. So right now all we can see is this Docker Compose YAML file. I'm going to kick off with just explaining a little bit about the application itself, just to provide some context. So it's a 3-tier application. So your client, your front end, your clients and your back end and your database. The client is a React application. Back end is a Node.js application, and the database is MongoDB. And the other thing that I'm going to set up, maybe I can show you the architectural diagram over here. We're not really going to go through everything that's demonstrated in here. But this essentially just captures what we're going to be doing when it gets to the pipeline stage. We'll only deal with the 2 stages over here, the source, which will pull our source code, and the build stage, which will be pushing through our images to Docker Hub. So yeah, and then in front of our client and our backend, we're actually going to have an Nginx container, which is going to be proxying any requests. So I'm going to kick off by showing you the Docker file for the that's going to be used to build our Docker container image. And you can see over here, I like to throw in a lot of comments in the code just because I typically forget. And also, I love to share a lot of tools that I work on or resources that I work on and put them on GitHub. So just to provide people that might want to download them a little bit of context as well. So yeah, we're building off the official Nginx base images you can see over here, exposing port 80. So the Docker knows where the port that we're listening on for traffic. I get rid of the default Nginx HTML image, so we don't have to worry about that. And then very important is we copy over the relevant configurations. So this will obviously vary depending on what your requirements are for the kind of application you're building out. So I'm going to open that. Relatively simple, all we're doing over here. So Nginx is simply just proxying incoming requests, making sure it goes to the relevant upstream server. So like I mentioned, it's listening on port 80. And then we've got our client and our backend. So the backslash is going to forward any or proxy any requests straight through to our client, which is our React application. And our backend, the Node.js application, is going to receive any requests that have the backslash backend. So we're going to code that into, or rather it's already coded into the React application itself to make requests. And then over here in these 2 blocks, we're just defining the 2 upstream servers and the relevant ports that those applications are listening for traffic on. So that's the only configuration that we actually have going on. There's a lot more that you can do with Nginx, but we're just going to keep it simple. And yeah, so this is the Docker file for that. And I'm going to move on to the client one. So the client is our React application. And then just so you can have a peek at what's going on in over here, just so you can see what it looks like. This application is To-do is my go-to when it comes to basic applications to build out. Yeah, I know people have different ones. So some people do think it's the tic-tac-toe. Yeah, To-do is my baby. So that's the one I usually go to. And so you can see over here the request to go through to the backend to fetch any things that we've added to our to-do list are right over there. You don't need to worry too much about this. Especially if you have no context on React. The focus obviously is on Docker, but just wanted to show you what that looks like. Now, something that I learned from other engineers online, just from different tutorials and stuff. This is not the only way to do it, but it's definitely an approach that I like, is you have a dev Docker file as well as one that doesn't have a .dev extension. The .dev is the one that's going to work for running your tests, and this one would be considered your production grade. So I like that approach. In this Docker file .dev, I'm using this Node.js base image over here. And I'll just throw this in there. This is actually an insecure image. It has a lot of vulnerabilities, but don't worry, Snyk will pick that up for us when I run it through the pipeline, just in case someone watches this and they're thinking, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to use that same one. Yeah, don't do it for production. Cool. And then, yeah, we go through the typical steps for creating our image. We create the relevant working directory. We copy over our package.json file so that we can install the relevant dependencies over there. And then we use the run npm install, which is going to be used to install the same dependencies for that React application. Copy over all the source code. And then for the command over here, I'm running npm run test because I want to run a couple of tests. The only test that I've created in this particular case is one that just basically renders the root application over here, or component rather, and just to check that it's rendering as expected. So that's the test that's going to get run over there. And as for our production grade one, if I could call it that, we're running through the exact same commands. The main difference over here would be the fact that we are setting up Nginx in front of our client application to serve all of our static content. So that's what's going on over here when you see these additional steps that are taking place over here. Cool. Right. Okay, so that is our client. Let's move on to the back end. The Docker files here, very similar to the React one because, yeah, both are JavaScript based, and in both cases we're using npm or Node Package Manager. And so I have a similar setup with the .dev file to run my tests, and we have the exact same commands over here in what would be our production grade one. The only difference would be the command that gets run to start up the application. In this case, it's npm run start, whereas here it's npm run test. And I've just added a test route. Let me see. So here's my particular test that's actually going to be run. And then let me show you the actual routes that have been created. Okay, so it's probably in app.js then. Yes, over here for testing purposes. There we go. So that's the one that's actually going to be used for testing purposes. Right, and then something that is probably important to note. So because I'm going to be running a database in a container on my local machine, so they take a bit of time to start up. And so if I was to run my my backend container, it'll fail because it'll try to connect to the database and going to run into an error. So you just want to be able to catch that error early on. And so this is just a nifty thing that I picked up online with just from other guys seeing how they were doing it. I thought it was a pretty cool approach where you just essentially have a loop that runs through different attempts. So the first attempt, it'll fail to connect to the database because the container is still starting up. And when it eventually does, it's decrementing the number of attempts. And when it eventually manages to establish that connection, your application will be up and running and your server is ready to go. So yeah, that's just a pretty important thing to note over there, because sometimes when you're running these multi-container applications and you got a database running locally as well, and if your database is still starting up and you notice that your backend is crashing, you start wondering, oh man, now what's going wrong? What am I doing here? So yeah, just important to note over there. Cool. So that is our backend. And then last but not least is our database. So in here, I don't have any Docker files. So there are different approaches to take over here. So what I'm doing is, and I'll go through the Docker Compose YAML file. What I'm doing in this particular case is I'm using the official Mongo image from Docker. But I am referencing this file over here to get the relevant initialization steps to create the relevant user. I don't mind you guys seeing my password right now. Does it really matter what this is? You can see over there. Yeah. So create the relevant.
I'm going to steal all your to-dos.
Cool.
I won't go do them for you though.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, this is necessary for the initialization process for your database, and we'll see some of the additional configurations over there when I go through the Docker Compose YAML file. Then you'll notice I've set up a Mongo volume over here. So this is cool if you want to persist the data in your database over there. That's going to be running in your container. Otherwise, it'll all just disappear. So volumes are super important, obviously, if you want to set up that connection between local and your container. So that's why I have this Mongo volume over here. Righty, so those are essentially the different tiers, so to say, of our application. So we can now go through the Docker Compose YAML file. I do hope the font size is big enough for you to see clearly.
I think it is. Never hurts to bump up one more.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. You can do that. And then
Perfect.
let me collapse that. All right.
Yeah, that looks good. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. And so, yeah, you start off by just defining the version that you want to be using over here. I'm pretty sure I'm confident they're newer versions. So you definitely bump that up from 3.3. I'm one of those guys who's just a bit reluctant when it comes to change, and I can be a bit stubborn. So yeah, definitely stick to the latest and greatest.
I hear you. I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, in here, the Docker Compose YAML file is essentially a configuration file where we define the different services and container types that we actually want to get running, up and running on our local machine. And so you'll notice that over here under the services, we actually have the different containers. We got our Nginx over here. We got our client, which is the React application. We got our backend, which is the Node.js, and Mongo for the database. And there are different properties that you can define in the steps over here. And so I want to, with Nginx, I define the property for depends on client and backend. We obviously want those to be running in the background. We don't just want to have a proxy server running and it can actually forward traffic to anything. And it's a super important piece in this particular entire solution. So we always want this to be running. And in addition, I just define how I want this container to actually be built. And so I specify that I'm using a Docker file, and this is what it's named. And the context is simply where you can find this particular Docker file. And the ports over here are used for the port forwarding that you want to use. And so I'm using port 80 to forward that traffic. And you follow a similar approach with the others. So with the client, my React application is living inside the client folder, and I'm using a Docker file called Docker file. Similarly, you can set up volumes as well, like I mentioned with the database. This isn't entirely necessary, but it is cool if you want to have that connection between local and container. And in this case, it's restart in the case that there's any failure. You can also give your container a particular name. And so I've given mine the name of client. And so backend works very similarly. An additional property that I've defined over here would be the environment variables, and the environment variables for backend.env is obviously let me actually go there. And you'll see, so I've got backend.env and mongo.env. And this is so we can have our connection string to our actual to-do database. So that's what I have as an environment variable, so that can be passed through so that our Node.js application knows which database to connect to locally. All right, and then last but not least would be Mongo. And like I said, you'll notice that this is a new property compared to the other services that are being defined. We have image here because I'm not building my image from a Docker file. I'm actually using the official Mongo image, and my container name is going to be MongoDB. And I go ahead for port forwarding. I set a particular range. Just another little gotcha over here. If you do have MongoDB installed in your machine locally and you try and get this container up and running, it will fail because that port will already be in use if you've got Mongo running on your machine. So you just need to shut that down. So that you can actually have the port forwarding working as expected. Right.
Awesome.
And then over here in the volume section, this is where we pass through the relevant configuration files that we want for the initialization of our Mongo database, the ones that I showed just a couple of minutes ago. And then in addition, we have an environment variable file over here living in the same env folder, Mongo env, and you can see these would be the relevant properties that are needed to initialize your database. You have your root username, your root password, and your database. Once again, that's me giving away all my super secret credentials. So yeah, just whatever you do, don't hack my to-do application and get all my to-do all the things on my to-do list done for me. Okay. Sweet.
Lukonde, just real quick.
Yeah.
I think it was a great point that you made. So in the so this is really cool. So in the database, that you could see in the compose file how you're just using an image, and that's why you didn't need a Docker file in the file system in your database folder, because we're not building our own kind of database image. We're going to use the official image for Mongo.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great point. Everybody kind of, if you're getting started, you're kind of like, wait, you're building above, but you're not here, and there's no Docker file, and so that's what's going on there. That's awesome. Yeah.
Right. And something that just another thing that could be pretty helpful is sometimes the building of these images can take a bit of time. So if you're pulling an official image, what you can actually do is run Docker pull. So you have it stored locally, and the initialization process when you run Docker compose up, which we're going to do shortly, is expedited because you've actually got that image locally now.
Yeah, cool.
Sweet. All right, so those are the different steps. I'm going to head over my terminal over here. And okay. All right, and I'm just going to run, man, all the typos.
Part about demoing is typing in front of somebody, for sure.
Yeah, right, exactly. I'm just going to go ahead and run Docker compose up. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Look at that over there. I was wondering why I wasn't getting any suggestions. Okay, cool. There we go. Okay, so, right, so that was pretty quick. Let me see if our backend did run into any issues. That's not so bad. That's pretty cool to see sometimes. All right, there you go. In the logs, you can see failed to connect to server on first connect. And then we got a couple of attempts left. So it's basically waiting for Mongo to start up, and Mongo starts up. And then there you go. There's the log for our backend over there. You see MongoDB connected. And so our application is up and running. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly just open a new window. And port 80, and there we go. And we're getting the feed from what's in the database. Usual developer talk, eat, sleep, code, repeat. There's a typo over there, watch a happy feet with Leafy. So around the time that I was first working on this was the first time that I watched happy feet. Leafy is Afrikaans for love. So that's watch happy feet with my wife, essentially. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I watched happy feet for the first time this year. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. So that's essentially our application running. So that means we've got our Nginx container working as expected. You can go through the logs over here if you want to keep an eye on how things are going. And that means that those requests are being proxied through to the client. The client is making the relevant requests to the backend and pulling that through. And then something that's also pretty helpful in the case that you want to just test your one of the specific containers for these different tiers is you can still, just get one of these running in isolation. You don't have to build it with Docker Compose, and you can go ahead and use something like Postman and test your API in that particular, with that particular container that you're running, as long as you remember to do port forwarding. Righty, so, and that just brings us now to our configuration file for the CI stage, right? So now, one thing that I love to do is to try and give somewhat of a full journey when it comes to working with different types of technologies. So like, ask yourself, okay, but what would this look like if I actually wanted to go to production, so to say, I want to actually deliver these containers. So in this particular case, you want to have your Docker container, or rather your Docker container images stored in a particular place, whether it's in Amazon's ECR or if it's on, if you've got a Docker Hub account. I love to have that full journey. If you get it up and running locally, how would I deliver it? And right, so in my particular case, I've built out a pipeline in AWS, and it's like I mentioned earlier, it's just a two-stage pipeline. We've got our source and our CI stage. Now the CI stage is using code build. You can use other tools for that, like Jenkins. And now when you're using code build, you can use what is known as a build spec file. You can name it whatever you want, as long as code build knows what it's looking for, but it's essentially a configuration file on the different steps that need to be followed over here. So in here, what I'm doing is I set my environment for Docker, and in this process, there are essentially three main things that I'm trying to achieve. One, I want to make sure that I'm actually securing my container images. So I want to detect any security vulnerabilities in the base images. And so for that, I'm using Snyk. I really like Snyk. I think it's a cool tool. And in addition to that, application level tests you also want to run. So I'm going to build my Docker images using the .dev extensions for the Docker files. And I'm going to run those so we can actually see the test results for those to see that, okay, that, the application is working as expected. And then after that is when I'm going to run the tests for the security vulnerabilities to make sure that it's actually, that we want to make sure that we're actually pushing through secure container images that when our containers are running in production, we're feeling safe about the images that they're essentially created from. And so just quickly giving a high level overview, and then we can go through the different commands in more detail. And then once we've done that, I want to, lastly would essentially just be building our production grade images from the production grade Docker files that I showed earlier. And then I log into my Docker Hub account. And the last thing is to essentially just push them through to Docker Hub in this post build phase over here. You can bump those up to the build phase if you like. And so just to go through the steps again. So I start off by installing Snyk in the container, because code build is essentially running a container. So I'm running Snyk. And so after that, then I go ahead and reference the relevant Docker file. As you can see over here, it lives inside the client directory. So remember, this is all pulled already from my GitHub account. And so it has that exact same source. And so I refer to this dockerfile.dev extension for client and backend. Now, just in case you're wondering what happened to the Nginx container, so we are still building it, as you can see over here down at the bottom. And in this particular solution, I didn't want to run a MongoDB container. I simply wanted to use Mongo Atlas, but you still want to be able to have that local development. So locally was where I was running the MongoDB container, but not necessarily when I actually push it through to the cloud. So that's why you're only seeing client and backend over here, is because we were actually just building these to run those application tests. Right, and so I run the relevant commands, I tag them with this suffix of test over here, and I reference the relevant files and where they live. And then after that, I run the React tests and run the relevant command for that, and put the flag for CI stage as well, and do the same thing for Node.js. And so those tests that I showed you for React and Node.js are essentially the ones that get run over here. And provided that those pass, then we can be happy about that. We know that our application is going to be working. But then a step beyond that, because we're using containers, we actually want to make sure that the base images that we're relying on are secure enough. And so what I do is I run the relevant Snyk command. So test is what's actually going to test for the security vulnerabilities. And it's really cool. It prints these logs that detect the different vulnerabilities, and it also shows you can set the severity threshold that you want, so it'll print all of these to the screen. And provided that passes, then it moves on to the next step, and you can set up continuous monitoring if you want, and that's this command that I'm running over here. And so in the Snyk command, you can see over here, if I just scroll a little bit more to the right, that you reference the relevant image. And so in this particular case, I'm still using the test images that were built, and I reference the relevant file over there. Now, provided that passes, then we can go ahead and build out our production grade images, which will eventually be pushed to Docker Hub. Righty. So I'm going to now go back to AWS over here, and I'm just going to run this pipeline. I actually didn't need to click release change. I could have just retried over there. So this does take a little bit of time. So yeah, while that's running, and I'll show you the results, I expect it to fail. That is planned because I'm using some insecure base images. Yeah, that's essentially the run through.
Awesome.
Cool.
And when so also Docker has a Snyk integration, right? So there's two ways. This is awesome, right? So you can actually use install Snyk, as we're doing here, and use the Snyk client, run your scanning and test for vulnerabilities, or you can use the Docker scan command. It would be the same way that's happening here. Instead of using the Snyk actual CLI, you could use the Docker scan, which is the CLI underneath with our integration. Yeah, it's really cool. Also, too, quick shout out if you're using try Docker scan out locally on your images. And then also log into Snyk. If you log into Snyk and do a Docker space scan -- login, that'll redirect you into Snyk's website. And you can set up a free account using your Docker ID. You don't have to create a new username or whatever on Snyk. You can just use your Docker ID. And then that'll up, I believe it's from 10 free scans a month up to 200 free scans a month. So just by connecting into Snyk, connecting your Docker ID in the Snyk, you get 200 free scans a month. So I would suggest go ahead and do that. Free scans are free scans.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely an important step. It's definitely an important step. You want to be able to scan your images and make sure that your containers are secured.
Yeah. I love the idea of the Docker file .dev, right?
Yeah.
And one for and just having your Docker file.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go back and forth with all kinds of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
And I've tried to use just one Docker file for everything.
Right. Yeah.
And I think I've kind of settled on kind of your pattern here too, right? Is the Docker file for dev, local development, and a compose file. There's so much. It's not the same environment that you're going to be running in your other environments, right?
Yeah.
Like in Stage and in dev integration and then in production, right, or whatever. And I've worked at multiple places. We have more environments than that, right? And you pass all through.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's really cool is if you have one Docker file for that, all of your environments outside of running locally, right? Because those should be pretty much the same, and you should be able to pass in different connection strings, secrets, those type of things into that container, but keep it the same.
Yeah.
But running local for dev, totally cool. Is do a new Docker file, do whatever you need to do locally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not the Docker file is going to be used to build and push into production. It's a different kind of environment where you're developing. So
that's right.
So that makes me feel okay, right? Where I just need one file and then trying to do some funky things with right. You have to get very complex to use one Docker file everywhere.
That's right.
So yeah, I agree. I think a local docker.dev, docker.local, docker file whatever it needs to be, right, to run your local dev environments for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay.
Sorry, one more thing. To your point, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
If you're using one compose file for local development and to launch, right, you're running a Mongo container local, right, and you're using compose
that's right.
to do that. But in production, you're not. You're using a hosted service, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so there's a big kind of difference there.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. I'll shut up.
No, all good. Sorry, my bad. So I just
worries.
want to tell you, so we can go through the logs, man. Let me spare you some of the pain. Zoom in here. You're probably wondering what logs I can barely see. I'm just seeing like white lines and a couple of blue lines over there. Right. So is that clear enough?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Cool. And so, so over here you can see like we're running our React application, building the image specifically for test. So it goes through the necessary steps. And then we go ahead and we want to, so all of this is installing of dependencies. Our image is successfully built. And then we do the exact same thing with the backend one. So scroll down further. And then we move on to the testing phase. So we can see run React tests. And so we run that. And you can see that it passed renders without crashing. We were testing that main app component inside our React application. And it gives us the test results. And you can see over there. And then we do the exact same thing with the Node.js application. We run the one test, which was just essentially just testing the test route that I created. And it passes as well. So then we move on to the next step, which is with Snyk. And like I mentioned, I'm actually using insecure base images. So you'll notice over here, this is what I really like. The test results are very helpful. It shows you the different vulnerabilities that were detected and shows you for this particular base image that I was using. And it also shows you the severity of that particular image. So you can see it actually even shows you and gives you some suggestions. This particular issue has been fixed in that version, this issue's been fixed in that version, so on and so forth. And it also gives, like I mentioned, it gives the level of severity. We got medium over there and we got a couple of high ones over here. So you definitely want to be able to have this when you're building your images for production. You want to protect yourself in this regard. And so our pipeline should fail in this sense. Even the pushing of the images fails. It's only if these steps pass that we will then build those production grade images, and they'll be found, and then we'll be able to push them through to Docker Hub.
Nice.
Cool. Ready. Do you want me to keep sharing my screen?
Yeah. Or are you Did you jump back real quick? I think I might have missed it. Did this?
Yeah.
It told you a base. Did it recommend base images for you? And you probably
So
said that I was answering a question. I'm sorry.
No, that's all fine. Yeah. So I was actually mentioning how with the different issues, it shows you the version that it's actually resolved in over there. You can say, so this has been fixed in this particular version, and it does that with each of the vulnerabilities that it detects.
Yeah,
and
super cool.
and here we go. Over there, recommendations for base image upgrade, and it shows you over there. You can see that this particular one, 0 vulnerabilities, and so this would actually be an ideal one to use in this particular case. So I love that.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. And then do you have this deploying all the way out into prod, or if you
so if I did fix this issue, then it goes all the way to prod. It pushes the images through to Docker Hub. So in this build spec configuration file, like I mentioned, so I log in using the Docker CLI with my relevant password and ID, and then it pushes the images that I build for production. It pushes those through to Docker Hub. And then depending on what platform you're using to run your multi-container application, it would essentially pull from those using the relevant Docker URIs. You pull those images and then spin up your application.
Yeah, nice. So we got a question here.
Yeah.
See some from Feather Ink. Love that. I need a better handle. I don't know. Maybe I'm too old. We put our real names on the internet. Anyways, thanks for joining us, Feather Ink. Is this repo for testing out untrusted images? Not sure what repo is talking about, but no, Lukonde was just demonstrating how in your CI/CD pipeline you can use Snyk to scan your images, right, and make sure you testing for vulnerabilities before you push into a production environment. But also too, I think Lukonde is going to share. You have this project up on Git, right?
Yep, that's what I'm showing right now.
Perfect. So you guys can go out and fork the repo, pull it locally, test, go walk through exactly what Lukonde was doing. Of course, you'll need AWS accounts and stuff. But yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Cool.
And in the case that you want to build the pipeline automatically, the relevant Terraform source code is located in this file over here, AWS pipeline IAC. And if you run into any issues, I do try to respond relatively quickly when people post issues on GitHub, and I'll respond and try and help you out where I can. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you very much. That was great, man. I love the way you even your sample app, right, is structured nicely, right, and real world type of application, right, with the reverse proxy sitting in front of it. Super cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really do love to go for that feel, because personally, I think that's something that I struggle with at times when I'm learning something and I'm like, okay, cool, but I want to be able to see the full journey going from point A to Z, and want to see what that would look like. So I feel like, sometimes having examples like this or tutorials like this, it helps with bridging that gap. So guys actually have an idea of this is kind of how I would go to production,
Right. Right. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's a balance, right, of doing something, real world, but then something that you can get through and talk about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Workshop or demo. But and then you have the risk of getting something too simple, right, where it's just too basic for everybody. But yeah, that was a great balance. Yeah, perfect.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a to-do application and using insecure base images. So yeah.
Yeah, but you'll just have more.
Just clone this and say, hey, sorry guys, I have this ready to go. We're ready to go. So yeah, just hold off on that. You'll still have to tweak it.
Yeah. I wasn't able to cross out my to-dos, Lukonde. You better fix that application. Well, cool. What kind of things where are you seeing folks? A lot of your clients these days. Where are you working at? Are you working? Primarily in AWS? Are you working across multiple clouds? I know you focus on AWS, but interested to see, what are you seeing out there in the real world around like CI/CD or folks still using a lot of Jenkins, or are they moving to the cloud in your experience?
Yeah. So I think Jenkins is still very popular and still very much in use, at least in my context. And yeah, at the moment, I am heavily using AWS. Definitely still intend to explore the other cloud providers as well, but my inclination is still strongly towards AWS at the moment. And just to your question about CI/CD, I think it also just comes down to the kind of application and how you're trying to deliver it as well. So, for example, the team that I work in right now, where we were using Amazon's ECS, which is a container orchestration tool, and we moved over to using EKS, which is essentially Kubernetes. And so there are different ways of managing your continuous delivery with Kubernetes. And so we actually, we pretty much don't have a pipeline for that. We're actually using a GitOps approach, which is different. And so with GitOps, we're actually using Argo CD, which with GitOps, it makes sure that whatever is live is pulled directly from, or rather reflects what's in your Git repository.
Yeah.
And so, so it basically, it's monitoring to see, and it's, you can set the relevant configurations for it to pull, and pull rather, sorry.
How's your experience with that? Are you I don't know, I'm gonna say enjoying, but I don't know if that's the right word. But yeah, I mean, you've done both, right? And GitOps is a little bit newer for me, right? I've been in a different role since, so I haven't done it in production, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so just curious to hear your thoughts, right, on doing it both ways. And I'm sure there's pros and cons to both, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There are pros and cons to both. And so I think with GitOps, actually, my team and I were definitely relatively new to it, but we've really appreciated the simplicity that it does provide, especially with a Kubernetes context. It has really been helpful. We love the fact that the way we've structured things and are able to push through to our repository is essentially what we should expect to see. And Argo is a really smart tool. So Argo CD isn't the only tool. There's also Flux, if I remember. Yeah, Flux is also really good and essentially does the same job as well. Argo CD gives you a really cool GUI, so it makes it easy for you and your team to see what's going on over there in your cluster. And so, yeah, we've really enjoyed that. Previously, when we were following the approach of having your more traditional pipeline, so to say, we found that we were kind of, coming up with different maneuvers to cater for our needs. And so in that particular case, because we were using Helm, and so we were essentially running the typical Helm commands that you'd be running for your charts. And so, yeah, that was becoming something that we thought was unnecessarily complex. Now, obviously, there are different ways of doing it. I'm pretty sure some people have cracked it. I think it still does come down to what your particular needs are. And for our needs, we found that it was really helpful to actually just, we still have you have a dedicated Helm chart repository where your Helm charts live, and Argo CD is essentially monitoring that repository and pulls through the relevant manifest files, and your resources are then deployed to the relevant cluster.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, super interesting. I want to play around with it a little bit with some of my side projects, and
you should.
Yeah, it's a totally different kind of paradigm of looking at deploying, right? It's a pull instead of a push, which kind of makes sense, right? Makes me nervous though. Why? I don't know, but cool. Did you get a chance to check out any of the AWS reInvent talks last week or so?
Yeah, sadly not. And this is we were actually in the middle of a very hefty deployment in the last couple of weeks. It was some interesting work hours, and that was the total focus. That anytime that wasn't working, I was pretty much resting or catching up on a bit of family time, and it was really bugging me. I was speaking to a couple of my colleagues and saying, "Man, I can't believe I'm missing all of the reInvent talks." So Yeah, but I love the fact that they're recorded.
Yeah. I was gonna say, don't worry, they're all recorded. Yeah. I think some folks are getting a little bit of virtual conference overload a little bit, right? There's so much this year, but everything is recorded, so you can always go back. Yeah. The reason I was asking, I was super interested about EKS Anywhere and ECS Anywhere. I don't know if you saw these yet, but especially like in the financial industry, it was yesterday I was talking to the AWS folks, and I think that's super interesting to be able to, EKS or ECS or whatever, wherever you're at, kind of in your container journey, right? But having that be able to run locally, and maybe in financial services, I know in the health industry, the healthcare industry, right, in the medical records industry, right, and and then e-commerce too, right, of being able to keep your data localized in country or data centers that you own, right? It's very important. So, but having all these, and then you have all these great, wonderful features in the cloud, right? But they're off-prem and all that type of stuff. Being able to run EKS locally. And still talking to Amazon services, but keep your data locally for the financial services industry sounds interesting, right? So it's interesting to see how this will play out, right?
Yeah, and very excited for that. I think that was really cool. And just to your point, like these industries have red tape for the right reasons, and so if they can still benefit from those kinds of services on-prem, then it's definitely a big win.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Oh, okay. Someone was asking a question, but I have no idea what they're talking about. Anyways,
okay.
No, I agree. Okay, I have. If anybody has any questions relevant to our conversation, like containers and building multi-containers, let me know. Anyways,
I can't see the questions right now, so I have no idea what the question is.
Yeah, no, it's not bad. It's not bad.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so I got some, and also too, make sure you put in your questions, and then folks can find you a couple places on the internets.
Yep.
Here's your blog, your personal website out on Medium. Go check that out. Follow Lukonde, does some great teaching. Smart dude, one of the smartest guys I've met in a long time. Again, really enjoyed your DockerCon talk, and then today was awesome.
No,
but I have some questions before I let you get out.
You need to meet more people, though. You need to meet more people.
You're too humble, my friend. And also, too, it's super interesting. This is a question out for the community, right?
Sure.
Seeing where CI/CD is going, where GitOps is going, GetSecOps. What other buzzwords you want to talk about, right? But everybody go to our roadmap, right? We'd love to hear your thoughts on how Docker can integrate more with your day-to-day work, right? Your inner loop, how you're developing and how you get code to wherever you run it in production, right? That's AWS, GCP, Azure,
that's right.
Hybrid cloud, right? Super interested. If you have any ideas, thoughts, features that you love to see in Docker, please go to our roadmap, create an issue, search for the issues first. I would ask, but if you don't find something exactly what you're looking for, create an issue in there. Our PMs, everybody at the company is looking at that roadmap. We do use it 100%. So Lukonde, I got a couple quick questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
So what programming language do you primarily kind of work in?
So I guess the top two right now would probably be Terraform, because just doing a whole lot of configuration for cloud resources. That is primarily a lot of where I spend my time. I'm not going to say YAML. I don't think.
I'll beat you up on that when you say YAML.
I'm not going to say YAML, but I do a lot of YAML configuration. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm not just as a side thing. There's a lot of YAML, obviously, because of Kubernetes and the relevant configuration that needs to be done. But aside from that, I think pet project. Yeah, you want to say something?
I was going to ask you this. So what are you excited about? What do you want to learn, right? Like whether it's a programming language or a new cloud automation tool or something. What are you excited about learning next?
I'd say what I'm most excited about learning next would be Go. I really do want to learn Golang, especially since it's it's the underlying language for a lot of the tools that I'm working with a whole lot. And I want to get a more in-depth understanding of it. So yeah, that's definitely top of my list for next language to learn.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, likewise, right? I mostly have a C, then Java, then .NET, C Sharp, then JavaScript kind of background, right?
Yep.
And I haven't gone. Of course, I program in Go, but just playing around, right? But nothing really production worthy, right? Yeah, Go is an interesting language. And so, what? So I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm curious. What OS do you run day to day?
The best.
Windows? No. Are you running Linux?
This is gonna be posted online, right? So I need to be careful what I say.
You better watch it.
Right now, I'm running Ubuntu. I'm running Linux.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And is that just because you primarily every other environment that you're in outside of your laptop is probably Linux, right? So running Linux locally is the way to go.
Yeah, it's definitely the way to go. I love it too. I mean, I'm on the same machine that I have. I dual boot, so I do have Windows as well installed on this machine, and then the laptop that I have at home as well is. So this is mostly for my work, and then the more family laptop is a Mac. So yeah, I do get to I get to survey and see the pros and cons across the board.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, again, everybody, thank you so much, Lukonde, for joining us. I really enjoyed it. Definitely going to have you back, whether you want to come back or not. I'm going to force you.
Right.
I'm going to fly down there and get you. But yeah, really enjoy conversations with you. Follow Lukonde on Twitter. You can see it should be up on the screen right now. Also, check out his blog for any latest writings and updates. Yep. Make sure you connect with Lukonde. And then also, I already put up the roadmap, but do head over to our community. Sign up. We have a community Slack, which has a lot of activity in it. A lot of engineers are in there. I'm in there. I'm not really that exciting, but a lot of our engineers are in there. A lot of leadership at Docker is in there. We do watch. We do interact with the community a ton. And then also, you can follow me on Twitter. Please feel free to reach out to me in Slack or on Twitter. Also on LinkedIn, I have a lot of folks that connect with me on LinkedIn. I will say, ask me questions, reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you guys. I will say this, I always put a little caveat in it. It's really hard to help troubleshoot and answer really deep technical questions in Twitter or in LinkedIn chat. And a lot of them usually go around, your specific environment and stuff like that. So please forgive me. Sometimes I'm not able to answer those questions easily, but I get you pointed in the right direction, hopefully. But yeah, please reach out. Love to hear from everybody. Lukonde, again, thank you so much for being on. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
If I don't chat with you before the new year here, you have a wonderful holiday season and new year. And I will definitely be talking to you in the new year for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. Thanks so much again for having me.
You totally will. Yeah, likewise. See you, everybody. Thanks for joining.